That's so delicious. God, do they still make that?
I have some over there. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, Jay.
What the hell's up with your parents?
They're such goofballs, right?
I don't. There's an inconsistency there.
I mean, I know
Why
that.
don't you review a little bit for the audience?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So, my parents came to visit this past weekend, and just Friday through Sunday, roughly. So, like Friday, they got in around 2 o'clock, and Sunday they left around lunchtime. So, but they were also staying with me because I have a guest room at my place. So, that was just, making things extra interesting.
Because they got to see you in your negligee? Why?
No, because if they were to stay at a hotel, it would sort of offer a natural respite because they would go back to the hotel at the end of the night or whatever. And then maybe the next morning, I would see them at, I don't know, 9 or 10 at the earliest. Or I'm just kind of guessing here, but...
Yeah.
But this way, yeah. So...
That makes sense.
Yeah, so they were here for the weekend, and they haven't really been that supportive of my transition, and so I was not looking forward to the visit.
Mm-hmm. And they bumped it up from what their visits normally happen in the fall.
Right.
And so you were kind of suspicious why they would have changed the tradition.
I wouldn't say suspicious necessarily. I was curious why they would do that.
Okay. Well, you thought that there might be a reason that was related to your transition. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that there would be a reason, and the most likely reason being my transition, I guess. But yeah, so because last time they came in October, but this time, and I think the time before it was October, because they usually come visit about once a year, and I visit them a couple times. And of course, being that I live in Dallas, July is pretty warm this time of year.
Why don't you tell me what your plans were and your expectations?
Okay, sure. When they came to visit last time, I had a barbecue on the Saturday they were here and invited a bunch of friends and such. But my parents pretty much consistently called me by the wrong name and the wrong pronouns, which is embarrassing even on its face, but especially so amongst my friends, and amongst my friends, some of whom had only known me as Ashley. So they had outed me. So this time around, I was thinking, let's not take that chance, because it would just be too embarrassing to have that process go through again.
Okay. And your parents had been pretty clear about their intentions to only call you by your birth name.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they have been calling me by a childhood nickname, Snooks Books.
Yeah, fair enough.
Although that seems to be mostly my dad, sometimes my mom, but yeah, So
no barbecue.
Right, so no barbecue. So this year I figured, well, maybe we'll go out to dinner one night, say the Friday night. Of course, on the Saturday, we could go out to dinner again. But I was thinking, well, given that they may refer to me with the wrong pronouns at the restaurant and out me there, if I just have dinner at home, that would lessen that chance too.
Okay.
So that's why I decided to make dinner on the Saturday. Just have dinner with the three of us, my mom, dad, and me. And then on the Friday, we could go out to dinner somewhere.
Okay.
So on Friday, we went out to a restaurant. I made reservations. And I specifically chose a place that I hadn't been to before, that I wasn't a regular, but for which I had heard good things about the restaurant.
Yeah.
I didn't want to choose a restaurant at which I would recognize the servers or vice versa, because my parents would likely out me.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of that. Okay.
Right, so I wanted it to be good food, but at the same time a place that I hadn't been before. I should mention perhaps a bit of background that I sent my parents a letter sort of at the end of May, in which I asked them to call me Ashley and use female pronouns and so on.
And if viewers or listeners haven't heard all about that, it's on the episode directly previous this one.
Yeah. So, and one of the things I mentioned in that letter was the anecdote about how when they came to visit in October and there was the barbecue, and, well, hey, that was really kind of mortifying when you'd out me in front of my friends. With having said that part, as we were headed to the restaurant on Friday, I mentioned to my parents, it would mean a lot to me if you would refer to me with female pronouns.
Did you just say that out of the blue as the beginning of a conversation, or?
So we were driving to the restaurant, and it's maybe 20 minutes away, so not too far, but far enough that we had time to chat and stuff. So that's when I mentioned to them it would mean a lot to me if you would refer to me with female pronouns.
Okay. Not just in general, but at the restaurant.
Well, that's kind of the thing, is that my intention was to convey, well, kind of in general, but perhaps especially in terms of the restaurant.
Okay.
Naturally, it's embarrassing when they use the wrong pronouns for me, but it's especially embarrassing when it's in front of someone who is not aware that I'm trans.
Right.
After I mentioned that to my mom and dad while we're in the car, my dad said to me, "Oh, do you know anyone there?" And I said, "No, I don't think so, but I may come across someone I've seen before."
It's possible.
And I didn't think much about it at the time, because I was thinking, well, that's kind of an odd thing to ask.
It almost sounds like a non sequitur, yeah.
Yeah, but it seems like my dad is kind of learning, if you will, just based off of patterns and sort of almost like a Pavlovian response or something, where
Okay.
he knows that X is embarrassing, but he doesn't seem to realize why it's embarrassing. Just here's sort of like the cause, and there was this effect kind of thing. Speaking of the barbecue with my friends.
And when you mentioned in the letter that it was mortifying at the barbecue, you didn't say it would be mortifying with anybody. You said it was mortifying because these were my friends, and some of whom had only known me as Ashley.
I said it was mortifying when they would refer to me with male pronouns in front of my friends.
Right. Okay. I mean, if we're being real specific and slicing and dicing, as a computer might, as a learning machine might, maybe that context is particularly important to your dad.
I mean, and I did add, as far as in that letter, especially among those friends who have only known me as Ashley.
Right.
So when my dad asked me that about if I would know anyone there, I didn't really realize at the time, but in retrospect, he's probably thinking, "Oh, it's embarrassing if we out her in front of people that only know her as Ashley," but not realizing that it's embarrassing either way.
Okay.
So anyway, so we're at the restaurant, and it turns out my dad only used pronouns to refer to me once during the meal.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was where we had ordered our drinks, and the server comes with the tray with the drinks, and who had the Merlot, that such and such kind of thing. And my dad says, "Oh, that would be his, I think." So, yeah, he fucked it up.
Okay.
So also,
you were drinking Merlot?
No, I was actually drinking Cabernet Sauvignon.
Okay. Because we will not be drinking any fucking Merlot.
That's a really good movie.
Last time I watched that movie, your parents were in the room.
Yeah, that may be my favorite Paul Giamatti movie.
That's fair.
And perhaps my favorite movie with Lowell from Wings.
Yes.
Much better than, was it Spider-Man 3?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, so yeah, my dad messed up my pronouns at the restaurant, and I thought, well, that did a whole heck of a lot of good mentioning those things on the way
Because
there.
it had been within 20 minutes that you asked.
As far as...
And he didn't necessarily say yes or no. He followed up with, will you know anybody there?
Right. So it was kind of ambiguous in that sense. I mean, it was probably a little more than 20 minutes, just given that we had to drive and then park the car and blah, blah, blah. Say half an hour. I don't know. So I was kind of discouraged at that point because it seemed like I had specifically asked them. I mean, not only in the letter, but also just right then and there in case they had slipped their mind or something. And yeah, so that went nowhere. And then after dinner, we came home, and my parents and I chatted a bit around the dining room table. And my mom especially would just continuously call me by the wrong name. And each time I would say, "Please don't call me that." And then I would continue with whatever the rest of the conversation was.
That's got to be exhausting.
Yes. In fact, I took tally of the number of times they called me by the wrong name and used the wrong pronouns. In fact, there is an app for that. not
What's that,
specifically for
calculator?
maybe the pronouns, but for tallying things. One I use is called Scorekeeper, which is actually very nicely designed.
All right, nice.
At any rate, so Friday evening, keeping in mind that they got in around 3 p.m. and
Mm-hmm.
they called me by the wrong name 18 times and used the wrong pronouns for me 7 times.
Just by way of comparison for our audience's benefit, I already told you about this, but a week or two previously, we had a bunch of friends over at the house, people local to San Diego who we've known, but they've never met each other. So there were 5 people that came over, 2
Right.
couples and a single person who is married, but anyway. So everybody introduced themselves to each other, and then I was paying attention secretly just for my own benefit throughout the rest of the night. Nobody used anybody's first name for the rest of the night. I just wanted to see if it was possible, and of course I didn't instruct anybody to avoid using names. I just wanted to see what the normal thing to do would be. So I think that your parents, when they talk to people, are just obsessed with using their name. It's the only thing I can conclude. I certainly don't do it that often, and it sounds weird when you're watching a TV show and people are always saying, especially in anime, oh God, they use names so much. And then I texted that to you and I said, I know this does not help with your parents, but just for the record, it is possible to talk to somebody without using their name.
Yeah.
Especially if there's only 3 of you around the table. I mean, if it were my parents doing that, I would think they were doing it on purpose to annoy me. But I didn't grow up with parents who did that, so
Right. I mean,
that's the big difference.
I think part of it as well is that having to know the layout of my place, and the dining room table sort of at one end, and it's roughly open planish for the middle portion, but there's the kitchen sort of 25 feet away, maybe.
Sure.
And so if they want another glass of wine or something, they may say, hello, birthday, we blah, 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 whatever. Or maybe that's just the way they're brought up, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's probably the latter.
Yeah. I mean, either way, it's kind of moot because it happens. And
Right.
so, yeah, my mom especially would be completely cavalier about my name and pronouns.
If I may ask, when she was speaking, did she seem like she was adding extra emphasis on your birth name? Or was it just the same way that she's always done it?
I think it's about the same amount that she's always done it.
Okay, so just sort of careless.
Yeah, careless. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I mean, my dad, on the other hand, he would call me Snooks Pooks more often. And interestingly enough, although this happened maybe only once or twice, he would say the first syllable of my birth name and then say Snooks Pooks.
Okay.
Which is nice that it shows that he's actually trying.
Right.
But to me, that's, I guess, half a loaf. And I mean, it's nice that it's something, but if you can substitute that, why not? Is it because he came up with Snooks Pooks?
I don't know.
Or maybe
I don't know.
because
That's a good question.
he sees Snooks Pooks as just a temporary, playful thing or something, that rather than being...
Or gender neutral.
Oh, it's supposed to Ashley, which...
Yeah.
Well, on the other hand, I mean, Ashley is usually for women, but it can be used for men as well, so...
But it was your father's opinion, if I'm remembering correctly, that he'd never met anybody, never heard of a man named Ashley before. And then he asked your mother, have you ever heard of a man named Ashley? And she said, well, yeah.
Yes, that is accurate.
So Friday night didn't work out so well.
Right. My mom would just... Even though my dad seemed to be trying, I mean, he would still mess up a whole bunch, and I would correct him. But my mom seemed to be not trying at all.
It is odd that they would have different... It's odd to me that they would approach it differently, because you think of your parents as a single unit with the same opinions about things.
Right.
I mean, my parents, one of which is a Democrat and one's a Republican, so they don't bother to vote because they just figured they'd cancel each other out. But if I'm thinking about the way they think of me, I would assume they were on the same page.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't know how this all works in their head. Other than maybe, I mean, my dad's always been very analytical and very logical. So maybe in some extent he's able to infer some of my feelings on this, or I don't know. It is really weird though.
And every time that they would use the wrong name, you said, please call me Ashley, and then continued with the conversation. What kind of reaction did you get when you would do that?
Usually they would pretend that I hadn't said it.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes with my dad especially, if he screwed up and called me by my birth name in one sentence, and if I said, like, say he said, "Oh, may I have another glass of wine, birth name?" I might say something like, please don't call me that, and sure, I'd be happy to pour you another glass of wine.
Right.
And then in the next sentence or two, he would call me Snooks So
Okay.
he wouldn't acknowledge that I had said it, but obviously he seemed to be hearing that I had said it.
Yeah. Makes me rather tense to hear about that.
Well, the most odd part was with my mom toward the end of the evening on Friday, where she called me by my birth name, and I said, please don't call me that. And my mom said, you may need to get used to that. And I said, I can't.
Yeah. That's not my name.
Right. It's as if she thinks that she's going to outlast me, or I don't know.
What did you say when she said you may need to get used to that? You said I can't, and then something maybe along the lines of why do you insist on calling me that? Or were you just too tired at the time?
I was kind of too tired at the time because, of course, on the Friday, this was not. They weren't here a full day. I mean, they only got here at 3:00, and they went to bed maybe at 10:30.
Okay.
So in that time
it's like
span,
3 times an hour they called you the wrong name.
right? Yeah. And admittedly, I sometimes didn't have the courage to correct them every single time.
Okay.
But I probably corrected them 15 of those times.
Yeah.
So that was just kind of exhausting for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I said I can't, I just kind of left it at that.
Okay. But it never turned into a fight. You didn't storm out of the room. You didn't throw a glass against the wall.
No, I didn't, but it was really exasperating because this is me, and I don't understand what they're trying to go for.
Mm-hmm.
Do they think, I mean, surely they don't think that I'm going to cancel my name change or something? Because that's actually within maybe a week of being finalized, give or take.
And they knew about you starting that process.
Oh yeah, yeah. And in fact, I've talked to them about, okay, I've turned in this paperwork, and then I've turned in this paperwork, so they're pretty up to speed on the process.
It may be idealistic, but I'm actually starting to think, since your dad's so analytical, that once he finds out that it's been officially changed, that might actually work for him. If you show him an updated driver's license or something, say, "Oh yeah, well, okay, I guess I call you Ashley now." Probably not, but
Yeah, I don't know. So, given how I was frustrated with my parents, I wasn't sure how to handle things with them. So I mean, I asked a few people over Twitter, like, what can I say to my parents? And some people suggested helpful things like tell them that you've expressed your need to have them use your name, and if they don't do that, then, well, among other options, they could stay at a hotel. I wanted to say something, but at the same time, there's sort of a fine line between being stern and being a jerk. Although sometimes maybe being a jerk is the right thing. Or is it?
well, jerk is subjective.
Yeah,
Being
it is.
stern can, in certain situations, be the only thing that gets the point across.
Right.
Certain personalities might see gentle reminders and politeness as a lack of commitment. I'm trying to think of a metaphor, but say, for example, you're at a comic book convention and you're downtown in San Diego and there's a lot of people all over the place. And there are police officers stationed at crosswalks to make sure nobody jaywalks.
Okay.
And you start to walk across because you've looked left and right and left again and seen that it's safe, and you start to walk across even though the light's not green, and the policeman said, "Oh, I wish you wouldn't do that."
Right.
You might think of that as more of a polite request and keep walking anyway. Because you really need to get where you're going. You know. Instead of the police officer saying, "Hey, stop it."
Yeah, no, I sort of see what you mean. So I wanted to say something to him, but I wasn't sure how to create those consequences for them other than simply kicking them out of my house, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah. Did that seem to you like the worst thing you could do? I mean, is there a middle ground of saying, go stay at a hotel tonight, but we're still going to do the stuff that we planned? Or were you talking about saying, I
Oh,
don't want you here, you're pissing me off?
I guess in my head I was thinking along the lines of, you could stay in a hotel and we'll still do the other stuff.
Okay.
But even then, given that they didn't have a reservation at a hotel, that who knows if they would be booked or not, who knows if their rates would be bad, if they were just, doing it the day of. Or am I just, see, I'm thinking too hard, aren't I?
You're just being extremely thoughtful, that's all. I don't
I
think you have to feel
guess.
guilty about that.
Yeah. So, to make a long story short, I didn't kick them out or anything. Although I was really, really tempted to do something.
Yeah.
And do you want to talk about Saturday?
Yeah, what happened on Saturday? Did you have a lovely breakfast? Did you make breakfast?
I offered cereal.
Okay.
Well, in my defense, I picked up my dad's favorite cereal and my mom's favorite
Oh,
cereal, and I
that's
got some
adorable.
milk in the fridge, even though I don't personally drink milk, but I know that's what they
Okay.
have with their cereal.
Okay. That's extraordinarily thoughtful again.
Well, I try to be a good host, even if my guests are not very nice all the time. It so happens that there's a new wine store that's opened in the area called Total
Ooh.
Wine. My dad said, well, how about if we go to Total Wine and we can pick up some wine for you? So I thought, oh, that's very nice of you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we went to the Total Wine store and we walk in and there's a guy wearing the uniform of the store or whatever, so he obviously works there. And my dad says, oh, Matt? Turns out this guy, who happened to be the manager of the store, a guy named Matt, used to work at the Total Wine in Charlotte, where my parents live. I know! Apparently what happened was that he was, I guess, the wine manager or some higher position, but not the top position in Charlotte, and then he was promoted to be the manager when they opened the Dallas store.
That's amazing.
I know!
If that happened on a sitcom, I would have been like, oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, so from there, my dad and him kind of chat a bit, and Matt asks them, oh, do you live in the area? Because, of course, he just saw them in his store. He didn't know. And so my dad says, well, we don't, but she does. Yay!
And this is officially the first time that either of your parents used the right pronoun for you?
Yes, that is
really
the
cool.
first and thus far only, but nonetheless, first time.
Okay, the first part makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were, I did a little happy dance for you when I saw that on the Twitter.
I know, it was so great. I lost my breath from it. I had to sort of just kind of concentrate on my breathing for a sec, because it was,
Wow.
I couldn't believe it.
Were you expecting this trip to the wine store to be yet another embarrassment of embarrassments?
Well, the thing is, I figured my dad would talk with the staff a bit and say, where would I find the Chardonnay, good sir, or whatever my dad says. So maybe they would say, oh, that would be on aisle 16, or I don't know, whatever. Maybe there would be a little bit of chit-chat, but it was only because this fellow Matt, who they knew, that there was this kind of opening for the small talk to begin with. I wasn't necessarily expecting to be outed at Total Wine, but it was actually like the opposite of which I don't even know what. Yeah.
Okay. Why do you suppose they took that opportunity to use the right pronouns for the first time? I say they, I mean he.
Yeah. Well, I think it was that my dad sort of thought in his head, oh, it's mortifying and embarrassing when we out her in front of people she knows. That seemed to be the sort of very narrow understanding my dad has of embarrassment with regard to outing me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess he thought, well, let's not embarrass Ashley and say she. So that was, I mean, I totally don't fully understand all the gears that are spinning in his head.
Sure.
But I'm happy nonetheless that it happened.
Well, when I saw it happen on Twitter, and given the things that you tweeted the night before, my conclusion was that your dad and your mom spent quite a while talking after they went to bed and decided to turn over a new leaf and try a new approach. And that was the first opportunity they had.
Okay, I mean, I think that, well, my mom throughout the weekend was completely carefree with my name and pronouns.
Right.
So at no point did she really... She may have called me Snooks Pokes once or twice, but it was fairly rare. Whereas with my dad, he seemed to call me Snooks Pokes at least half the time. But anyway, so while we're at the store, he said "Gee," which was totally awesome, and I wanted to just give him a big hug right
Sure.
then and there, but of course I didn't want to draw attention to the fact that he just used the right pronouns for me, because that would...
My dad knows where I live. Isn't that great?
I know. So it so happens that he continued to talk with Matt for a little bit, and it just so happened that a sentence or two later, a he did slip in there. So I was like, well, but at least there was a one, I was thinking. And then my dad did have that he slip in, but then once we continued about our shopping and Matt went about his way, my dad sort of said to me, "Sorry, missed one." So he realized that he slipped up on one.
That's remarkable.
I know. It was just...
What did you say?
I was just in disbelief. Because he's never called me by the right name, and I figured that would happen far before he got the pronouns. I was thinking pronouns was going to be years away.
Okay. But when it does happen, and then he says something like, "Sorry, I missed one there," that's a very important opportunity to give positive reinforcement.
Right. And I think I said, "Oh, that's okay," or something like that, or I don't know what I said.
Okay.
I didn't have a proper chance to thank him there, but I did write him an email later, which we can talk about in a little bit.
Okay.
Anyway, we did our shopping at Total Wine, and by this point it was probably 2 o'clock, so we thought, hey, we should go get some lunch. I heard about this new cafe sort of in the area, and like the other restaurant is one I hadn't been to before, but I had heard good things about it. And so we went there, and it turns out the owner of the store is South African. And my parents, they also grew up in South Africa. My parents noticed, for instance, the mural of Cape Town on the wall and said, "Oh, is the owner from South Africa?" And the server said, "Oh, well, we'll send him over and you can chat a little bit." So the owner came to our table and just had more small talk. They were talking about, "Oh, where are you from?" and this kind of thing. And my dad said, "We live in North Carolina, but my child lives here." Yeah.
My child.
Which, okay, he didn't say my daughter, admittedly, but he didn't. He got it right. I mean, in a sense, I mean, it was a little clunky in language, but it wasn't the other word.
Yeah.
So that's
all right then.
I know.
That's cool.
That is cool. And it's really great that he seems to at least understand that outing me in public is embarrassing. And it would just be nice if he could understand that I would like female pronouns all the time, and not just when we're chit-chatting with some cafe owner from South Africa.
Would you say that at least your dad has taken a few steps forward then? Or do you think that he was just pretending for the benefit of some strangers out in public?
My dad, he seems to be taking steps forward in the sense that he seems to have like a cause and effect understanding of things, that, okay, X is embarrassing, so I won't do X. But he doesn't seem to fully understand that this is who I am. Because, for instance, after we got home after the cafe, he continued using male pronouns. So he doesn't seem to understand that, no, I'm not one gender when we're out and another gender at home. I'm just me.
Right. And I can't say that it's because of the way you wrote the letter, because there's been plenty of letters and plenty of in-person conversations where you've expressed exactly what you just expressed.
Right. Right.
24/7.
Yeah.
In all contexts. Huh.
Yeah.
Odd. Are you regretful that you didn't plan a barbecue so that you could have tested that in more contexts?
No.
Okay.
Well, just in the sense that, okay, so my dad got my pronouns right once, which I don't mean to downplay that because it was really awesome that he got it the one time because he hadn't done it before. But at the same time, in the context of a barbecue, he would probably have messed it up at least a few times in there.
Okay. And also it's 100 degrees outside.
Well, that, and as well, he could quite possibly mess up my name during the course of a barbecue.
Sure. Yeah.
Because even if he seems to be trying in terms of pronouns, even if only a little bit, on the name, that's kind of a hit and miss kind of a thing. But anyway, so the tally for Saturday then? Wrong name 14 times, wrong pronoun 6 times. Which is less than Friday, even though they were here for a full day on Saturday. But nonetheless, that's still a lot.
Did you start a different category on your tally app for correct name and correct pronouns? If you're tallying the wrong ones, wouldn't it be fair to tally the right ones?
Yes, that would also be fair. Although the telling the right one I just did mentally because those were 0 and 1 respectively.
Okay. Well, maybe for next time then.
Yeah. Okay, so on Sunday then, which is the day where they were heading out, you may find some of this next anecdotes somewhat familiar given some of the bits from earlier episodes. So we were standing outside putting their luggage in the car and stuff, and my dad sort of gestures in my direction and says, "Oh, I got a new bag recently, and they say that it can fit an iPad." And I said, well, I don't know if this holds an iPad, but also this is a purse.
A purse is a bag.
Yes.
Nothing about that makes any sense.
I know. It's as if he keeps telling himself that.
That's better than pouch.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Almost anything is better than pouch for any reason. Wow.
Yeah. It's as if he keeps.
And they say that it can hold an iPad. Okay. Was he talking about a messenger bag, a briefcase, something smaller?
I'm guessing it was sort of a crossbody messenger bag type thing that my dad got. So that was kind of weird. I mean, it was funny to me given his previous pouchiness, but at the same time, it's as if he was trying to convince himself that it wasn't a purse or whatever.
It's ridiculous to say maybe he can't tell the difference, but maybe he wears his messenger bag over one shoulder instead of across diagonally, and
maybe. And the purse I was wearing at the time was a crossbody, so. But then again, it's not.
See, I didn't know those even existed.
Are you serious?
I thought one of the definitions of purse was it goes over one shoulder and hangs on the same side.
Not necessarily.
And usually has a rounded bottom, or at least rounded corners on the bottom.
That is true of many purses, but not all of them.
Yeah.
But mine is, I mean, it is distinctly a purse, but it is not. It is crossbody.
Okay, so that was weird.
That was weird. And, well, but I did write a letter to my dad. Well, an email, rather, to be fair, on Monday, just thanking him for calling me by the right pronouns and such, because it really meant a lot to me. And so I sent that to him, and he replied to me. He writes, and he says, "You're very welcome. I was merely trying not to embarrass you in front of other Dallas people." Okay, so far so good. Even though, parentheses, kind of weird that he offered the caveat of in front of other Dallas people because it would be embarrassing anyway. But then my dad continues, "Even so, I must say that Mom and I still think of you as birth name." So there seems to be a disconnect somewhere because that
Let me ask you a hypothetical question, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure.
This isn't a hypothetical question.
Okay.
Is it especially important to you how they think of you, or is it more important to you how they address you when you're in the room, quote unquote?
In the long term, the former is more important to me, but in the short term, I can live with the latter, I guess.
Okay.
Even if they're just humoring me at first, even if they don't really understand why they're calling me Ashley, but if they were just
Right.
doing it to placate me or what have you, that would not be ideal in the long run, but as a short-term thing, I could be okay with that, given the alternative of just continuing to call me by my birth name.
What are you going to do now?
That's kind of the tough part, is that when they were visiting naturally, in some sense I had, or it felt like I had more leverage, since on one hand I could give them the boot and say, hey, you should stay at a hotel, even though I would probably not want to do
It's
that.
not, I don't know if they'd even really consider that a punishment. Do you think they would?
They probably would, in the sense, if
They would, I mean, they'd know that they hurt your feelings. Certainly.
yeah, I mean, they would know that it was something I was doing as a consequence of things.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially because, I mean, they had already unpacked stuff in my guest room. So there was, there was that, and also another angle that a couple friends suggested is saying something like, you are guests in my house, and I would like you to respect what I would like you to call me.
Sure.
And that does have some appeal, the whole I'm hosting you as a guest kind of thing. Though my only qualm there is whether it might give them an out when I went to go visit them. That if I phrase it in terms of, you're a guest in my house, please call me by my name, I wouldn't want them to then turn around and, when I'm visiting them, say, well, you're a guest in our house and we're going to continue fucking up your name because whatever.
Right. That's a fair concern.
Right. I really value the friends I've made over Twitter, trans friends and other allies that a lot of them I've never met in real life, but they really do feel like just honest to goodness friends, that they've really been supportive and encouraging. One person, she mentioned, at times patience can be good, but at the same time, patience can also be overrated. That there's value in patience, but if there's no progress, it's...
Yeah.
So maybe it's a matter of me being more of a jerk about it, or because, for instance, a lot of what I would say over the weekend is, please don't call me that, and then continue on with what they had asked me about or whatever. But I could say things like, it's not okay for you to call me birth name, or even just saying, please don't call me that, and then just pausing for a moment there to let it sink in, or...
Right. Or something like, that's not my name.
Right. I could say, yeah, that's not my...
Or simply not responding.
Right. Yeah.
Which I think we talked about in the last season.
Yeah. Or my friend Jen, who's from Chicago. Hi, Jen. She mentioned the idea...
Smart ass.
Yeah, I know. She mentioned a potential idea that if I'm talking to them over the phone and they call me by the wrong number, I could say, for instance, oh, did you want to try that again?
Okay.
Which could go either way, because my parents are belligerent enough, they might just say no. And then I would be like, then what do I do?
Birth name doesn't live here anymore.
Yeah.
There's no one here by that name.
But one thing I've been thinking about, though, is that I've thus far tried to be nice with my parents to the extent that I've been able, as far as correcting them, but not being a jerk about it. But for instance, when I go to visit them over Thanksgiving, if we're having some drinks before dinner or whatever, and if they call me by the wrong name, in the past what I may have done is said something sort of off to the side privately, but now no more Mrs. Nice Girl, because I'm just going to correct them in front of everyone, and if that's embarrassing for them, well, that's too bad.
And in that situation, they'd be outnumbered anyway.
Right.
I'm not thinking of like a rumble in the street. I'm just saying there are more people there who would call you Ashley.
Right, yeah.
Including you and your brother and apparently people that you met last time.
Yeah. And one side benefit that occurred to me, as far as if I correct them in front of everyone else, is that it may offer subtle license to say, you may correct my parents. Sure. Because thus far, either because my cousins and aunts and uncles, I mean, they've been good allies, but they have not corrected my parents to my knowledge.
Okay. I wonder if there's a neutral way of saying that, like, this may need some workshopping, but something like, if my mom and dad call me by the wrong name, go ahead and correct them. They seem to be having some trouble adapting.
Yeah.
Because that's true. But it's not indicating that there's like a big fight going on.
Right. I mean, that's kind of, as Obi-Wan would say, true from a certain point of view.
If you want to make it real quick, you could teach me something ladylike.
Sure. Yeah, we could do that.
Yay.
Okay. I have 2 jobbies.
Yay, jobbies.
Okay, right. So, okay, this first one is actually one that I heard about from Xana. Hi, Xana.
Oh, yeah? Hey.
Yeah.
It's the famous Santa from Seattle.
That's right. Yeah. And so this is... Pew. These are... I don't know if you can read this. Sephora Quick Drying... Sephora by OPI Nail Color Drying Drops. So it's OPI, but Sephora... I don't know how that branding works, but you can buy... It's at Sephora. Anyway, what you get in there is this little jobby, and then like this little dropper doodad.
Yep.
And then naturally you just take off the top thing and... But I'm getting ahead of myself because what these are quick drying drops for your nails, and you can apply it after your top coat, and you just basically put a drop on each nail.
Okay.
And it does help them dry faster. It maybe dry to the touch in 10 or 15 minutes.
Percentage-wise, how much faster is that?
Maybe a third of the time, or
Okay.
maybe faster than that.
It saves a third, or it saves 2/3?
It would be, say, 10 minutes versus half an hour. So whichever one that is.
It saves 2/3.
Yeah. They are very handy in that your nails can dry more quickly.
Okay.
And hey, that sounds nice, doesn't it? The one downside is that, and I learned this from talking with my friend Chance, who is the husband of Katie. He's a chemical engineer.
Yeah.
And I was asking him about nail polish stuff, about why don't they just put chemicals in nail polish to make them all dry really quickly?
Mm-hmm.
And what he was saying was that you could do that, but the trade-off is that making them dry more quickly reduces their flexibility and increases their brittleness.
Ah.
So, you want some flexibility in your nail polish so that when your nails themselves bend a little bit, that the polish itself will just gently bend rather than crack.
A little like the difference between hot fudge and magic shell.
Sure, yeah. Oh, that is so delicious. God, do they still make that?
I have some over there.
You have some?
Yeah. In fact, it's almost gone.
Do they have a dark chocolate version?
Probably, if they're not stupid.
Yeah.
I know they got flavors.
Right. So anyway, okay, so the Sephora by OPI Quick Drying Drops, they do make your nails slightly more brittle, which in the long run means that you might get, say, I don't know, 3 or 4 days out of them instead of maybe 4 or 5 days. Although
okay.
there's a large degree of variance depending on what you're doing with your nails. So which say if you're just typing versus sitting on the beach or whatever,
Okay.
So given the option, if I have an evening set aside for doing nail stuff, and if I'm not in a big hurry, I will skip these because it can make your nails slightly more brittle, even if not a lot more brittle.
Okay.
Say if I've got a happy hour after work or something, and I realize, oh, my nails are chipped, and I just have to touch them up that afternoon and whatever, then yeah, I might use some of those because heck, even if it only lasts 3 or 4 days, well, that's plenty in the context of this happy hour after work kind of a thing.
And what are they called again?
These are called Sephora by OPI Nail Color Drying Drops.
Drying drops. That's probably trademarked or something. Do you know if there's like a more generic way of describing that product?
I don't see any trademark marks on here.
All right.
But anyway, so yeah, you can just get these at Sephora. And it's, even though it's some weird co-branded like Sephora by OPI thing, which I don't know how that works, but I mean, OPI is a good reputable brand among nail polishes, so yeah.
Right on.
Yeah. Okay, so second jobby.
Ooh, right on.
Yeah. You recognize these guys, little cotton balls?
Oh, sure, you bet.
Okay, so I learned this tip from Cinnamon. Hi, Cinnamon.
Hello.
She passed along a link to this technique, and this is for removing your nail polish. And it purports that you can get your nail polish off in 5 minutes, which is actually a little bit optimistic, but it's still pretty spiffy. So essentially what you do is you take your cotton ball and you unravel it. So it just kind of unravels it's like a cinnamon roll.
Yeah, I never tried that. Interesting.
I know. I never knew this either. So you unravel this guy and then But once you've got it unraveled, then this is just a single cotton ball. You tear it down the middle so that you got two sort of long hot dog pieces out of it. So you got these two guys, and then you tear those off in chunks that are about an inch long. So like this guy.
Okay.
And then once you've got all of those, then you take your nail polish.
Your nail polish remover, you mean?
So take the cap off, and then you just pour some, maybe 2/3 of the way full into the cap. And then what you do is, then you take your little torn off piece of cotton, and you don't want to dunk it in. You just dip it in, and I believe it's capillary action, which will pull it up into the cotton swab. You sort of dip in maybe a quarter of an inch. So what I've done here is I've just poured water into this cap for the sake of example, because I don't actually want to remove my polish.
Oh, okay.
Which, if you're curious, do you want to guess what the name is? You probably won't. This is one it's called Fantasy, except it's SEA at the end. So I guess it's like some kind of ocean theme, something.
Sure.
Anyway, so you got this thing dunked, and then let's see if I can sort of reverse it. So here's my thumb, and you just kind of press it on there, and you can see I've got the jobby stuck on there because it's wet and so on. And so essentially what that does is you do this on all of your nails, and you kind of feel like a pretty wampa because you got all this. Yeah. I'm a pretty wampa. Okay, so those just sit for maybe a minute or two, and essentially your nail polish will just be soaking in your acetone or your other nail polish remover.
Sure.
And of course, one advantage with this that I only became aware of in the post that Cinnamon passed along is that you're not abrasively rubbing your nails. So it's essentially letting the acetone do the work without having the friction against your nails that could damage them.
Okay.
So
I didn't know that could damage them.
It's the rubbing with the cotton swab. It's the pressure of the friction and so on. Yeah.
All right. But you've tried it?
I have tried this, and then so this sits. Now imagine you have it on all your nails, and then you take one of the other torn off pieces, and you just push down, and then pull upward from the bed of the nail to the tip. And that was another thing I learned, that you always want to go with the grain, as it were. You don't want to go side to side, because that can further chip your nail.
Wow.
And if possible, you want to go from the bed of the nail to the tip when you're pushing.
Sure.
And if you've done it right, you'll be able to get off your whole nail's worth of nail polish in one swoop, which is super handy. The only potential downside with this is that under old school systems, I mean, you'd have your cotton swab, which you would sort of dip in the polish, and then you'd rub, and it would kind of gradually come off onto your cotton swab. But under this system, you've got essentially a whole nail's worth of nail polish on this little piece here.
Yeah.
And basically, because it's been soaking in your nail polish remover, it more or less liquefies your nail polish.
Okay.
So all that is to say that when you're taking this off, if you happen to hit your knuckles with this piece of cotton swab, you'll get like a big swath of semi-liquefied nail polish.
That could be gross.
Kind of. And sort of at the end of the thing anyway, you may end up just taking like one of these spare little strips, dipping it in, and then just, if you ended up with some whatever,
Sure. Cleaning outside the lines. Sure.
Right. But on top of that as well, when you're removing these, depending on just how much nail polish remover you've dunked in this thing, that because it's kind of liquefied, it can even, in rare cases, sort of drip off. So just make sure that maybe you're doing this over top of for instance, a glass tabletop, which if you get nail polish on, wipes off very easily.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So, that was jobby number 2. And that actually works really well. That's probably going to be my go-to sort of technique for removing nail polish.
Actually, that's good to know. Thank you for sharing with us. I'm looking forward to next time.
Yeah, so am I, Jay. Yeah.
Good night, sweetie.
Bye, Jay.